What's the most unforgivable thing a teacher ever did? I remember the room spinning as I collapsed in chemistry class, everyone staring as I clutched my stomach and started vomiting uncontrollably. The teacher standing over me with her arms crossed saying I was just trying to get out of the test. And I remember thinking, this is how I'm going to die because nobody believes me. It started 3 weeks earlier when I first told Mrs. Davidson about my severe gastroparesis. It's a condition where my stomach can't empty properly, and certain foods or stress can trigger violent episodes that land me in the hospital. I had complete medical documentation from my gastroenterologist explaining everything, which foods to avoid, warning signs to watch for, and emergency protocols if I had an episode at school. I handed her the medical note on the first day of class and watched as she barely glanced at it before shoving it in her desk drawer. She rolled her eyes and said, "Another one with a mysterious stomach condition. Let me guess, you can't take tests on schedule either?" I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to get special treatment, just needed her to understand my condition was real. But she cut me off and said she'd been teaching for 15 years and knew when students were making excuses. The next few weeks, she'd make comments whenever I'd asked to step out briefly during flare-ups. "Oh look, Emily's tummy hurts again right before we start lab work," or "must be nice to leave class whenever you want." Other students started thinking I was faking too. One boy even said, "If your stomach is so messed up, why do you eat lunch?" Which showed he didn't understand my condition at all. My mom suggested I keep a detailed food diary and check in with the nurse regularly to document everything, which I did. But Mrs. Davidson kept dismissing my medical needs. Then came the day of our midterm exam. I'd been feeling nauseous all morning but thought I could push through. About 20 minutes into the test, I knew I was in trouble. The familiar burning sensation, the cold sweats, the dizziness. I raised my hand and whispered that I needed to go to the nurse immediately. Mrs. Davidson looked at my barely started test and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Absolutely not. You can hold it until everyone finishes." I tried to explain this was a medical emergency, but she just pointed at my paper and said, "The only emergency is your test grade." I kept trying to focus on the questions, but my vision was getting blurry and my stomach was churning violently. I could taste bile rising in my throat. Finally, I couldn't hold it anymore. I vomited all over my desk, my test paper, and the floor. The smell was horrific, and other students started gagging and moving away. But instead of getting help, Mrs. Davidson was furious. "That's disgusting. You did that on purpose to get out of the test." I was doubled over in pain, still retching, but she kept yelling at me for disrupting the learning environment and destroying school property. One student finally said, "Mrs. Davidson, I think she's really sick." But the teacher just said, "She's fine, just being manipulative." I tried to reach for my phone to call my mom, but I was too weak to lift my arm. My legs gave out and I collapsed onto the floor next to my own vomit. Thankfully, the math teacher next door heard the commotion and called 911 immediately. I spent 4 days in the hospital with severe dehydration and had to get IV nutrition because my stomach had completely shut down. When I returned to school, the principal called me in, and I thought finally Mrs. Davidson would face consequences. Instead, he slid a paper across his desk saying the school board had reviewed the incident and determined that I had failed to properly manage my medical condition. They said Mrs. Davidson acted appropriately based on the information available, and I would need to sign a form acknowledging my role in creating a disruptive health incident to return to her class. I refused to sign, and my parents threatened legal action. Suddenly, the school found new evidence. Turns out Mrs. Davidson had thrown away my doctor's note and told other staff I was a hypochondriac. She was fired, but I still have panic attacks whenever I feel nauseous at school.